Joining me tonight to discuss all of this, break down day one, is attorney and former prosecutor Rick Convertino. Thanks for joining me tonight, Rick.
Thank you, Shana.
So let's start with the charges. It doesn't sound that exciting, I guess. Falsifying business records. Can you explain to us exactly what the prosecution is trying to prove here?
Well, what the prosecution is trying to prove is that the falsification of the business records was more than just an accounting glitch. It was, in fact, it was purposefully, they were misidentified, they were misappropriated in order to hide the fact that there was a scandal to cover up or protect the then candidate for president of the United States. In other words, the reason for the payment was to cover up the fact that the porn star was being paid off or to kill the story by the National Enquirer. In return, the public, the general voting public, would not be aware of the scandal, and that was what was trying to be covered up here. It was essentially a lie that was manifested in the business records.
Now, the defense says that the NDA, any payments, there's nothing really to see there. So can you break down what the defense's strategy is?
Well, the defense, is interesting. You heard the former president after court today was saying, hey, it's no big deal. It's just an accounting error, accounting glitch, I think he said. It's a minor thing, he said. And this is an attempt at jury nullification, which is an improper defense and not allowed by the court. In other words, what they're trying to do is they're trying to tell the jury, listen, yeah, he may have done it, but it's no big deal, and therefore you should just acquit or be hung. In other words, mistrial, and that's an improper jury argument, not going to be allowed by the court. The main defense is that you have a bunch of liars and cheaters, thieves, no good account witnesses who are trying and have a motive to lie in this case. And what I used to tell jurors in this case is you have these witnesses, and the facts emanate from a conspiracy in this case. The allegations are that there was massive fraud and a cover-up by all the co-conspirators. And what I always tell the jurors is, hey, you take your witnesses as they come. I didn't pick them, you didn't pick them, the defendant picked them. And there's no swans in the sewer. If you could get 12 nuns to testify and bishops as the alternates, you would. But in this case, you have what you have. And like I said, the witnesses, and in this case also, the witnesses are going to be corroborated by receipts, as they say in common parlance, or documentary evidence. So, I think that the opening statement by the prosecution, and I didn't see it. I wasn't in the courtroom. There's no live feed other than press reports by reporters who are in the courtroom who are giving constant updates. And I read it and I kept up on it. And so, what I gleaned was it was a good yeoman-like, dutiful opening by the prosecution. Seriatim went through the facts, what they're going to prove, said their story and their narrative in a clear and concise way. And then the defense started out by saying President Trump is innocent. Now there's that's not the burden of proof. Of course, it's either guilty or not guilty by unanimous jury, and the proofs by the prosecution must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Innocence has nothing to do with the case, and so that's a tall order, and that's a big promise to make to a jury right off the bat. And that's what opening statements are. They're promises. You're promising the jury, and it's your first attempt to speak to them directly, all of the jurors at one time. And your veracity is on the line, your integrity is on the line, and you have to be straightforward and honest and tell what you're going to prove and what you're not going to be able to prove, and be upfront with the jurors, because they'll watch for it. They're taking notes. They're going to be able to compare what you said with the proofs as they come in. And certainly, beyond all peradventure, is no way in this case will any defense attorney be able to prove that Donald Trump is innocent in this case. I anticipate that there's two outcomes. I don't think it's prognostication is too over the top when I say there's two outcomes, and that is guilty on all counts, or a hung jury, which would emanate in a mistrial. which is not a victory for the defendant in this case. So, but I'm anticipating, based on what I've read, what I've seen, what I've heard, that of course I'm not in the courtroom, that it'll be a guilty verdict in this case, and then and then who knows what will happen after that.
Well, it's going to be several weeks before we see whether that comes to play or not. Rick, do you think there's any world in which the former president takes the stand himself in this trial?
Yes, there is one world, one universe, and that's in the former president's head. Other than that, in the common world, I don't think he'll get up and take the stand. I don't think that's a remote possibility, given the fact that today the judge announced in his order what will be allowed in, which is almost everything, all the pejorative and negative facts from prior trials, prior testimony, prior actions by the Trump organization and Donald Trump himself will be allowed in. It's a wide variety that the prosecution will have the ability to cross-examine him based on all of that. I don't think there's a chance in hell that Donald Trump will testify, notwithstanding what he says and what he said in the past about him testifying.
Sure. Well, just one witness so far, and again, several weeks to go. Rick, thanks so much for your time today. We hope you'll join us again to keep breaking down this trial.
Thanks, Shana.